All right, we're going to get started. So I'd invite everyone to please close your eyes and we'll say our opening prayer. Take a nice big deep breath and let it go. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. Amen. Last week we began exploring some of the concepts in the Course about, adjusting here, about the darkness. And I mentioned the concept of the darkness of the soul and how, as we go through our journey, it's not terribly uncommon, I guess is a good word to use, that we might encounter some experiences that would be considered to be the dark night of the soul. And these can be very challenging and they can be very difficult to get through. So I think it's helpful that as we practice the Course, we're at least aware that that's something that could happen to us and that we understand that that is normal in this process. And though very challenging, something that it really calls us to put our tools to the task. So I'm going to begin with reading a paragraph, actually two paragraphs, and I think this first paragraph especially really emphasizes the challenge that we have between asking God to come down and fix our world and us leaving the world and walking towards what he has to offer. And I don't remember seeing anything quite this specific before in the Course. There may be, but I have not come across them. So we're going to go to text 378 in the new book, 252 in the old book, if you happen to have an old book. And the section is called Light in the Dream. Paragraph 1. You who have spent your life in bringing truth to illusion, reality to fantasy, have walked the way of dreams. For you have gone from waking to sleeping and on to a yet deeper sleep. Each dream has led you to other dreams and every fantasy that seemed to bring a light into the darkness but made the darkness deeper. Your goal was darkness, in which no ray of light could ever enter, and you sought a blackness so complete that you could hide from truth forever in complete insanity. What you forgot was simply that God cannot destroy himself. The light is in you. Darkness can cover it, but cannot put it out. So let's go through that line by line. You who have spent your life in bringing truth to illusion, and I'm just going to stop there. Basically what that means is we call on God to fix our world. From the time we were a little child, I want that puppy, I want my new red bike, I want my car, I want my house, please God help me get these things. And Jesus is trying to help us understand that that's exactly what we do for the most part. We are calling on God to come down, fix our world. And the Course is really focusing us in a totally different direction because the answer doesn't lie in God coming down into the world. And from the perspective of the Course, God doesn't even know about us. So how could he come and fix something that he doesn't even know about? All right, so I'll read the whole line. You who have spent your life in bringing truth to illusion, reality to fantasy, have walked the way of dreams. So what he's trying to say is that bringing God into the world to fix it, is continuing the dream. It's continuing to perpetuate the dream because we're not getting to the core of what the problem is so that we can bring it to healing. For you have gone from waking to sleeping, and on and on and on to yet deeper sleep. So, as we continue to reinforce the dream by investing it in the game that we're playing of the ego, we continue to move forward into the darkness. And I like to think of it as if this is the light and I'm walking away from the light, it continues to get darker and darker and darker. And that whenever we start to turn around and start walking towards the light, we begin to become more and more aware of what the light represents for us. Each dream has led to other dreams, and every fantasy that seemed to bring a light into the darkness made the darkness deeper. So again, as we're walking away from the light, it gets darker and darker and darker. And there is a line near the beginning of the course which talks about the idea that there's a limit to how much pain we can tolerate. So as we walk away from the light and it gets deeper and deeper into the darkness, there comes a point where we can't tolerate it any longer. We, on some level, recognize that we're not the ones that can find an answer that will solve the pain that we experience. And despite our best efforts in the world of trying to control our lives, make it better, fix them, the answer doesn't lie in the world. In fact, there's a line that goes, seek but do not find, and that's what this world is about. It's a world of seek but do not find, because the answer of love doesn't live here. And as you can see, this thick black line between these two sides, nowhere does this enter this or this enter this. You're either on one side or the other side in any given moment. Your goal was darkness in which no ray of light could enter. Now, you might wonder, what do you mean my goal was darkness? Well, when we chose for the ego, our goal was the darkness instead of the light. And understand, the ego is the total opposite of what the light represents. So when we chose for separation, we chose the opposite of what we were. Instead of love and peace, joy, connectedness, we chose guilt, sin, and fear, separation, suffering, pain. Now, I don't think we necessarily knew that by choosing to separate, that that's the effect we were going to experience, but that is the result of having made that choice. And so as long as I want to maintain my connection with my ego, the facts are I want the darkness rather than the light. And why do I want to connect with my ego? Because that gave me an opportunity to be an individual, special, and on my own. And I was no longer the effect of God's dream, the effect of God's love. I got to be God, or we got to be God. So it was a significant shift for us that brought us what we wanted. It just didn't, we couldn't bring the love of God with us when we went in the opposite direction. And therefore, we're experiencing darkness instead of the light of God. And you sought a blackness so complete that you could hide from truth forever in complete insanity. So 2 comments I'm going to talk about insanity, but before we get to that, when we chose the opposite, we had the tiny mad idea where the Son of God remembered not to laugh. He took this seriously. He was whirled into this darkness that was so intense that he couldn't tolerate it. So he was too afraid to go back to love. And so what he did was projected it into the world, made the individual self an innocent victim, and everything and everyone else outside the problem. So with this choice, with this bargain, we remained an innocent victim, made everything and everyone else guilty party, and we pulled off having separated from the love of God. And we don't want to leave the darkness because we're too afraid of the light of God. So this worked out to the best of our advantage. Now the problem is this character never goes away. and we never align with that light, that connection, that love. And so no matter what we accomplish, no matter what we get in the world, it always leaves us empty in the morning. And I sometimes I teach ice, or I taught ice skating for many years, and so I was around the skating world a lot, and I know it's kind of interesting how someone can win the highest title, and then the elation and the excitement and the thrill of that, and then tomorrow morning it's back to square one again. No matter what we get, no matter what we accomplish, no matter how great a moment in our life can be, the next morning it's starting all over again. All right. And then I mentioned the concept of insanity, and I don't have the attributes on either side of the chart today because I'm in a different setting, but normally there's a dark side here that's got guilt, sin, and fear, separation, sorrow, suffering, and so on. And the other side is joy and peace and love and harmony. And I would say Jesus frequently tosses in the concept of insanity, and you might think that's a little bit harsh, but if we could recognize that choosing for the ego has brought us nothing that we really want other than being in charge, and everything else is fallen away and was replaced by things we're really not fond of. But the Holy Spirit side, or the choosing for love, is all the attributes that we do really want. And if we watched ourselves or looked from afar and saw that we were choosing this instead of this, we would call ourselves insane as well. What you forgot was simply that God cannot destroy himself. Good news, God cannot destroy himself, and we are literally a reflection of God. And we can't destroy what we are. We can't destroy what God is. In fact, numerous places throughout the Course, it specifically states that what God is can never be shifted, it can't be changed, it can't be altered, it is eternal. It is only in the movable aspects of the dream of the illusion that there is this continual change and fix and do something new. The constant of the love of God remains consistent across the board. And we can cover it over with the shadow of the choice of the ego and experience our world from that place, but we can never affect what is true and who we are. The light is in you. Darkness can cover it, but cannot put it out. So there's nothing any of us can do to alter or harm light, but to the degree we maintain our investment in the ego, we will reap the effects of the choice of the ego. Paragraph 2. As the light comes nearer, you will rush to darkness, shrinking from the truth, sometimes retreating to the lesser forms of fear and sometimes to stark terror. But you will advance because your goal is the advance from fear to truth. The goal you accepted is the goal of knowledge, for which you signified your willingness. Fear seems to live in darkness, and when you are afraid, you have stepped back. Let us then join quickly in an instant of light, and it will be enough to remind you that your goal is light. And I think as we begin to become more and more aware of the effects of what the choice for darkness look like, we have that desire to move forward to find out what the light is. What does he have to offer that we're not getting as a result of choosing for the ego? So as the light comes nearer, you will rush to darkness. And I'm just going to stop there. I think if you think about this from the perspective of the fact that we are in a dark cave, and we've been in that dark cave for eons of time, and then somebody finds us and they're trying to drag us out into the bright sunlight, it would be too shocking for our system to walk into that light in a very short period of time, and it could actually blind us. So we want a very gradual process of unfolding so that one day that light is just a natural step forward. So he says, as the light comes nearer, you will rush to darkness. And if I'm not ready for that light, the intensity of that light, I will walk backwards into that darkness, shrinking from the truth, sometimes retreating to the lesser forms of fear and sometimes to stark terror. And that really represents how uncomfortable the light is for us at this time. But he goes on to say, but you will advance because your goal is the advance from fear to truth. When we become aware that the fear is not where I want to be any longer and I want to find out what that light is, even if I'm uncomfortable walking in that direction, then I will slowly find my way, because my goal, my decision, my situation of this is not working for me any longer will heighten, and I will continue to walk forward into that truth. The goal you accepted is the goal of knowledge for which you signified your willingness. So the Course talks about the concept of willingness throughout it. And Jesus is saying, all I want from you is the little willingness in this moment. Will you choose differently? And even if it's not every moment of your life, those moments when you do choose for that willingness are the moments that we are working towards. And every time you have the little willingness to choose for this instead of this, you are literally shifting your awareness from the identification with the ego to the connection with that love. The goal you accepted is the goal for knowledge. And, the idea of choosing for this side of the chart is knowledge, not information knowledge, but the knowingness of who you really are. Fear seems to live in darkness, and when you are afraid, you have stepped back. And think about it. How many moments of our day do we spend in fear? Fear of something. And if we're in fear, we don't trust the love of God. Let us then join quickly in an instant of light, and it will be enough to remind you that your goal is light. So every moment that we quickly come to the instant of light, and I know for some of us that are fairly new, it takes some adjusting to what the Course is talking about in the process of unfolding and understanding how it works. But the more quickly we can join to the light, that recognition of I want the light more than I want the darkness, will be enough to remind you that your goal is light. And I think for people who have been in the Course for some time, we begin to recognize that I remember quicker. I don't have those moments of, not moments, but a long period of time before I remember to choose for the light. I remember more quickly. I don't stay stuck in the darkness as long. And the process of practicing and learning the Course is about bringing ourselves to that place more and more quickly as we progress through the journey. All right, so I am going to shift to a different section here. Text 62, paragraph 1, and this section is called This Need Not Be. And it's paragraph 1. If you cannot hear the voice for God, it is because you do not choose to listen. That you do listen to the voice of your ego is demonstrated by your attitudes, your feelings, and your behavior. Yet this is what you want. This is what you are fighting to keep and what you are vigilant to save. Your mind is filled with schemes to save the face of your ego, and you do not seek the face of Christ. The glass in which the ego seeks to see its face is dark indeed. How can it maintain the trick of its existence except with mirrors? But where you look to find yourself is up to you. So if you cannot hear the voice for God, it is because you do not choose to listen. And I can remember reading sections like this, and there's numerous places throughout the course where basically Jesus said, if you don't hear the voice for God, it's because you don't really want to hear the voice for God. And I can remember going, well, wait a minute, I really, 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 really want to know the voice for God. What do you mean? It's because I don't want to know. And the reason why he puts it out that way and shares that consistently through the course is because literally in any given moment, you either want this or you want this. And I can sit here and say, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. But until you're ready to relinquish any attachment and connection you have to the choice for the ego, you're not really aligned with the Holy Spirit. And I don't have it today, but I have a picture of an iceberg, and we can only access or see the very top part of the iceberg, and yet underneath there is a huge amount of the iceberg that is on the subconscious level, and we're not really aware of how identified, how addicted, how attached we are to the thought system of the ego. And to whatever degree that's holding us, we're not going to choose for the voice for God. But every time we ask, every time we have that little willingness, we are making further connections with that desire, that request, that wanting to find out what the truth is instead of what we have chosen. That you do listen to the voice for your ego is demonstrated by your attitudes, your feelings, and your behaviors. So, how do I respond to my life on a 24-hour day experience? Am I in joy? Am I attacking? Am I fearful? Am I anxious? All of these represent what I've chosen. Because if I chose this, the only thing could come from me, much like a lighthouse, is the reflection of light instead of what we are normally responding from, which is usually not quite the same as only light. And this is not a reprimand from Jesus or God. This is a recognition, because if I recognize that this is where I'm coming from, it's a reminder that I now have another choice and that I need to walk to a different place if I want different results. But the deal is, if I continue to see effects in my life, I have to recognize that those effects, though they appear to be taking place here, are really a result of the choice for the ego in our minds. And we can try to solve the problem here all we want, but it's never going to access where the cause is, where the real healing will take place. And so the Course is always directing us in that direction of let's go to the cause, where the problem lies, so we can solve that. And then when we choose this, then the results are going to be the love and joy and peace that we seek for. But again, we need to observe, pay attention. What are the hooks in my life? What triggers my reaction to issues in my life? These are the situations that are important for us to become aware of, because this is where your specific healing comes from. And I might have one trigger that doesn't affect you, and you have another hook that wouldn't affect me. So we really need to hone in on what are the specific triggers that really get me going. And once again, it's not about feeling guilty by being aware that this is what's going on. That's the first step of a recognition that I need help, I need healing, because this is not in line as I would like it to be. Yet this is what you want. Okay, again, this is what we want. What? Huh? What is he talking about? But if I want to remain an innocent victim, I have to have a perpetrator, or I can't play the game of duality and be the innocent victim. So on the level of the mind that I want this to be in line, really needs this conflict to keep going. This is what the ego lives and breathes on. And when we let this go, it frees us to recognize our truth, but if I'm too afraid of truth, I want to keep this going. So I want this because this allows me to be an innocent victim. And having gotten rid of God and playing in this role, that's my best recourse until I decide going back to the oneness of love of God is really what I want. This is what you are fighting to keep and what you are vigilant to save. And we can sit here and think, well, what am I so adamant about trying to hold on to that when it's obviously not in my best interest? But at this point in time, if I want to be an innocent victim and I still want to be in control and I still want to be God, basically, then I'm going to continue to perpetuate this thought system, despite the fact I may say with my mouth that I want only love. Your mind is filled with schemes to save the face of your ego, and you do not seek the face of Christ. And I always kind of chuckle with the way that Jesus approaches the Course, because so often he will tell us exactly where we are, what we're working on, what is going on in us. And we try to hide it under the carpet, and he keeps saying, well, guys, look, you are, where's the word? You are scheming to keep the ego alive. Well, a person who doesn't need that hidden place would not be scheming to keep this going. It would be very gladly sitting over here on the side of connection. So think about all the ways, and again, observe, pay attention, get in alignment with what the deal is with your ego, and find out the ways. Do I scheme to get control or make things happen in my life that I am in control instead of God? And we'll have another line later on that's just perfect in regard to this. All right. So as long as I want anything to do with the ego, I don't want what God has to offer. Again, this or this, nowhere do they meet in the middle. The glass in which the ego seeks to see its face is dark indeed. And you might want to think about this from the perspective, as you see, this is shaded over here on this side. That's everything of the ego is shaded in that darkness. And if I walked into the room with sunglasses on, literally everywhere I would look, it would be shaded with the sunglasses. And when I take those off, then I can see clearly what was always there in the light. But we wear these dark glasses, which is called the investment in the ego. And as a result, we can't experience the connection with love and light. How can it maintain the trick of its existence except with mirrors? And it does talk throughout the Course about mirrors and smoke. And I sometimes think about, going to a magic show and you see the magician cut a woman in half. You might go in and talk to him after the show is over and say, show me how you cut that woman in half. And his response would be, I can't show you how I cut the woman in half because I didn't really cut the woman in half. But if you ask the magician, how did you make it appear that you cut the woman in half? Then he could do that. Well, we're looking at what appears to be truth, but it's not truth. And the Course is trying to help us dispel the images of the mirrors and the smoke so that we can see clearly the value of choosing differently. But where you look to find yourself is up to you. And again, if I'm looking to find myself here, I'm not accessing this. And if I choose for this, I'm no longer accessing this. It always has to be, what do I want? All right, paragraph number 2. I have said that you cannot change your mind by changing your behavior, but I have also said that, and many times, that you can change your mind. When your mood tells you that you have chosen wrongly, and this is so whenever you are not joyous, then no, this need not be. In every case, you have thought wrongly about some brother God created, and you are perceiving images your ego makes in a darkened glass. Think honestly what you have thought that God would not have thought, and what you have not thought that God would have you think. Search sincerely for what you have done and left undone accordingly, and then change your mind to think with God. This may seem hard to do, but it is much easier than trying to think against it. Your mind is one with God's. Denying this and thinking otherwise has held your ego together, but has literally split your mind. As a loving brother, I am deeply concerned with your mind and urge you to follow my example as you look at yourself and at your brother and see in both the glorious creations of a glorious Father. Whoa, how's that one? I have said that you cannot change your mind by changing your behavior, and I'm going to stop there. Just become aware that changing our behavior is always taking place in this arena. We can, do things in the world, change things, make things appear to be better. Certainly in our culture today, we have, dishwashers and, clothes washers and so on. Things have seemed to advance as far as our technology and the things that we have accomplished, but the same thought system is still intact, and it's not healed. This may make things look a little better in your life or in your world, or you may change jobs because you have a hard time with the position, and then you move on to something else, and for a while it seems to be better, but then it can shift and change. So this will have false pretense of a healing until we really get to what the cause is, because without the cause being healed, the effects are going to continue to rain down on your life. So I have said that you cannot change your mind by changing your behavior, but I have also said, and many times, that you can change your mind. And from the perspective of the Course, changing your mind is the only real recourse that we have, because the Course is always talking about what's going on in my mind. Am I choosing for the ego? Am I choosing for the Holy Spirit? And when we can change that mind, that's when the effects of that choice will start to come in play, just like the effects of this choice come into play automatically when we choose for the ego. When your mood tells you that you have chosen wrongly, and this is so whenever you are not joyous, then know that this need not be. And this is kind of interesting, because when he says whenever you are not joyous, well, we're so addicted to all the effects of the ego that we don't even consider looking at the fact that I'm not joyous on a 24-hour moment-to-moment experience. We're so used to being pulled into the ego and all the many ways of which it can pull us in that we don't even recognize how unjoyous we are in the world. But he's trying to help us understand that when you're not joyous, this need not be. We can do something about this. We can change this, but you have to become aware that you're not joyous. If you're walking around saying, oh, everything is wonderful, everything's okay, and in truth, you're suffering and you're wounded inside, then you're not going to ask that question or choose differently to find a different way. We have to recognize, we have to acknowledge, we have to become aware of what we're doing and what's going on. In every case, you have thought wrongly about some brother God created and are perceiving images your ego makes in a darkened glass. So we look at what God created, which was the Son of God that was perfect just like he was, and all the attributes that God have are given freely to us. And we chose differently. We chose against that. And as a result, we're always looking through that dark glass, that dark lens. So if you think about yourself, an innocent victim, and your perpetrator, they're all coming from this mind. We projected out into the world what we didn't want to see in our mind, and then we pretended we were an innocent victim. So we're literally making of our brother and ourselves, for that matter, something other than what we really are, because we've chosen against what we are, then made our brother the problem instead of recognizing that the thought in our mind is where the problem lies. And as a result, we see our brother as guilty, as sinful, and of course we see ourselves that way a lot of times as well. When all the time, behind that darkened cloud of the ego, we remain that sweet, adorable, innocent individual, or not individual because we would all be one at that point in time, but that truth of who we are remains intact. It's only the darkened glass that we're looking through that is causing the experience of us seeing our brother as something other than what he is. Now, I love this next line. Think honestly what you have thought that God would not have thought, and what you have not thought that God would have you think. But what do we think about our brother? The programming of the ego mind is kill or be killed. I'm going to get you before you get me. That's the setup. That's the pudding the ingredients of the pudding that the ego is all about. So our mind is really trained to see our brother as guilty. And is that a thought that God would have about our brother? And the answer is no. God would only see that brother as well as ourselves through the lens of that love. And much like a lighthouse, the lighthouse is just light. It can't be anything else. But if we cover that lighthouse with a dark cloth, the light would not shine, even though it would not be seen as shining, though the light would always be shining. Think honestly what you have thought that God would not have you. I'll read it again because I think it's a beautiful line. Think honestly what you have thought that God would not have thought, and what you have not thought that God would have you think. So literally, when we drop the story of the ego, we're inviting the Holy Spirit to fill that space with what it is that he does think about us. But as long as I insist on looking through this lens, I can't access that. Search sincerely for what you have done and left undone accordingly, and then change your mind to think with God's. So if you're thinking or experiencing anything that's not of light, anything, guilt, sin, fear, sorrow, pain, you name it, you know you're not aligned with God. So the way this was set up was that we were to make something outside of us the problem. So now the Course comes in and says, let's use what you set up for a different purpose. Now, when you recognize that something or someone can take your peace away, we're being asked to be reminded that what the problem is not this. The problem is what the choice is. And most of us are familiar with the workbook lesson number 5, which talks about the idea of you're never upset for the reason you think. You think you're upset from something outside that's occurring outside that's affecting who you are. But the Course keeps reminding us, no, that's a trigger for what the problem is. But the problem is the thought in our mind that we harbor that covers over the love that we are and the love that our brother is. And as long as we insist on looking through this lens, again, we have no access to this. This may seem hard to do, but it is much easier than trying to think against it. Well, Jesus oftentimes will tell us things aren't that hard, but from our experience, because we're so addicted to the choice for the ego, it will highly likely appear to be a bit of a challenge, especially initially. Trying to become aware. I'm looking through the dark glasses. I need you to take those glasses off. Or if you think about walking into a dark room, what do? You flip on the light, and suddenly you can see everything that was there. And it's that flip, that shift, that change that we're looking for to bring us back to what we really are. So again, he says it's easy, or it may seem hard to do, but it's much easier than trying to think against it. So what he means by that is you're when you think against what you really are, it's almost like holding down a ball in water. It takes a great deal of effort, and when you finally let go, the ball just buoyantly pops up because that's what a ball does. And he's trying to help us recognize this isn't as difficult as you may think it is, but we do need to practice. Your mind is one with God's because, again, nothing has ever changed. Who I am, it remains the same, even though I'm playing this game where I've dressed up as something different than what I really am. And I've forgotten that I've dressed up in that image, and the truth of who I am still remains. Thank goodness. Denying this and thinking otherwise has held your ego together, but has literally split your mind. Yeah, and literally our mind is split between these two choices. And when we mind melded with this choice, we forgot we even had this choice. And the Course's main focus, and something Ken would say over and over is the number one most important aspect of this Course, is that we are no longer brain dead, because here is, after we projected in here, we forgot this existed. So it's been our whole life experience right here. And as long as we remain here, we don't recognize we have a mind that could make a different choice. So the Course is all about becoming aware you do have another choice. It's available to you. Even if you're not ready to choose it, it is still available to you. As a loving brother, I am deeply concerned with your mind and urge you to follow my example as you look at yourself and at your brother and see in both the glorious creations of a glorious Father. So Jesus is trying to help us understand there is another way. We have another choice. You can do this. And he's concerned, and Jesus is not really concerned. This is just a way of him expressing this, but we're the ones that are being challenged by the effects of the choice that we've made. And he's trying to help us recognize, I did this, I accomplished this. Look what happened when I was crucified. I looked at my brothers and knew they were simply calling for love. I could do nothing but love them back. As opposed to if you or I hanging on the cross today, most likely we would be not very happy and be pointing fingers at what was going on. But the beauty of this is when you're aligned in your mind completely with what truth is, no matter what appears to happen on the outside will not affect that connection with the love. And literally, the moments of little willingness are taking us to that place where we are connected with that light and love in a completely unequivocal manner where nothing can disrupt our peace. Nothing, zero, absolutely nothing. And again, that was what the lesson in the Course really represented. Jesus trying to help us recognize he didn't die for your sins in the manner that it was discussed in the Bible. He showed us that even in the most difficult scenario, if you choose to connect with the mind of love, it doesn't matter what happens on the outside. And certainly, I think we all recognize in light of that we have some work to do. We have some understanding or moving forward in this connection with what we are to accomplish that recognition that I am light, I am love, and there's nothing that can disrupt or take that away from me. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. I'm going to read that again. As a loving brother, I am deeply concerned with your mind because he wants us to remember who we are. And up until the time we found the Course, and even still, we're challenged of recognizing that we're the ones responsible for the choices that were made. But the good news is that we can choose again. But because we're so addicted to choosing for the ego, it's going to take a bit of practice before we come to the place where we can live this and put it into practice on a daily basis in our lives, which will then eventually take us to this awareness of who I really am without disruption. All right, we're going to move to paragraph number 3. When you are sad, know this need not be. Depression comes from a sense of being deprived of something you want and do not have. Remember that you are deprived of nothing except your own decisions, and then decide otherwise. When you are anxious, realize that anxiety comes from the capriciousness of the ego, and know this need not be. You can be as vigilant against the ego dictates as for them. Okay, so when Jesus is telling us, when you are sad, know this need not be. But the challenge of this is when you're sad, don't you just fall into the trap of I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad, and repeat over and over in your mind and reinforce it over and over and over. And Jesus is trying to help us understand you don't have to stay stuck in that. Choose differently. And I will lead you to an experience where the sadness falls away. Depression comes from a sense of being deprived of something you want and do not have. Well, the real thing that we want and do not have is the connection with the love of God. We think we want the new shiny car or the new outfit or the new spouse or the new whatever that the world has to offer to us. But what we're really looking to fill is the hole that the love of God really represents. And as long as we're looking for the answer in the place where it can't be found, we're never going to connect with that. It's not possible because it doesn't live here. We have to recognize you're either standing here and you have to let this go and move over to here, or vice versa. But as long as you're here, this is not available to you. You have to let this go to connect with this. All right, so remember that you are deprived of nothing except by your own decisions, and then decide otherwise. And in that one prayer, I am responsible for what I see. I choose the experiences that I have. And it goes on and on and on to help us become aware the result of this is because of the choice of this. And owning that that was a choice we made collectively as one son, and that's what's running the frame of reference that we're living through, is what we need to become aware of, because as long as I'm oblivious to what the cause is, there's certainly no way that I can come to a healing for that. And recognizing this is a result of a choice that we made, but we can now make a different choice. And how do I know this is a choice I made? I'm not fully joyous, as it said a couple paragraphs ago. So if I'm not completely joyous, I can do something. There's a choice that can be made that can resolve that problem. And this is the best news we have going, guys. We finally have a resolve to the issue that we've fallen prey to. When you are anxious, realize that anxiety comes from the capriciousness of the ego, and know this need not be. Okay, even take anxiety. Many people from the time they were small children experience anxiety. Is this something that you think you chose? Heck no. But it is a natural response from having chosen for the ego, because I am not living who I really am. I'm under this false pretense, and that's really what the anxiety is about. And once again, along with the sadness, when you feel anxious, it seems like it takes over you. It encompasses you. It certainly doesn't feel like this is a choice that I've made and I can make another choice. It seems like it eats you up. But if you can think about it, when we chose for this, we put it in the popcorn machine and turn it on. And then we put a line across to forget that that's what we did. And the popcorn's popping out in our lives. And sometimes it looks like sadness or anxiety or fear or terror or whatever adjectives you use. But they're all coming from the choice of the ego in our mind. So when you are anxious, realize that anxiety comes from the capriciousness of the ego, and capriciousness might be substituted by fickleness if you aren't completely sure of that word description is. And know that this need not be. So Jesus is offering us a gift of what can be done to combat fear of the anxiety or the sadness and reconnect with the truth of who you are in your mind. Yes, this is going to take practice, but the answer is available for that other choice. You can be as vigilant against the ego dictates as for them. And if you can think about it in any given moment, what am I putting my thought towards? Is it the anxiety? Is it the sadness? Is the irritation, the upset? Or am I shifting it over to this? And I sometimes talk about the idea if you fall this way and you're on a tightrope, you straighten up. If you fall this way, you straighten up. Fall this way, you straighten up. But what we do is every time we falter, we become aware that I've done this, we oftentimes just knock ourselves on the floor and sit and wallow. And as a result of that, it takes a great deal of effort to pull ourselves back up and put ourselves back in line. But this is saying if you find your mind going in a direction other than that connection of love, stop, reconnect, stop, reconnect. And in the chapter 30, Choose Again, it talks about starting the day with the desire and the choice of connecting with love and God. And when you find yourself faltering or stepping off the path, bring yourself back, bring yourself back, bring yourself back. No matter what direction the pull is taking you, bring yourself back. But in order to be consistent with that, you have to become very firm in your mind. What is the goal? What is it that I really want to accomplish? Do I want to be right, or do I want to keep my focus on moving towards peace and the connection with the love of God? And as he says, you can be as vigilant against the ego dictates as for them. It's always up to you to make the choice of what you want. And yes, it's going to take practice, but do you really want it? Now, if you're learning how to play tennis, you go out on the court, you got a tennis racket, and you have no idea what you're doing with it. So eventually the balls come over and you start hitting them forward, and then the backhand, and then you keep practicing and it keeps coming back until if you really, really, really keep that as your focal point, eventually you can hit that ball back no matter which direction it comes towards you. And the same applies to the practice of the course. What do I want? Do I want the vigilance of the ego, or do I want the vigilance of the Holy Spirit? It's up to you. It will require some effort on our part to become conscious of when I am aligning with the ego, and then question, is this where I really want to stay? And there is a quote that talks about the idea that the ego will still continue to come at you. You will still continue to respond like you always have. But the question is, do you want to stay there? Is this where you want to stay? Or is it time for you to make another choice to align with what truth is? So I challenge each of you to practice this week. Take these tools. This need not be. Even in the midst of a crazy moment, can you remember this need not be? And choose differently. All right, let's take a nice big deep breath and let it all go. Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. Let us receive only what you have given, and accept but this into the minds which you created and which you love. Amen. See you next week.